March 2nd, 1988, Michael Jackson's Bad had dominated the charts with 5 consecutive #1 singles, rewriting every music industry rule in the book. But on the night that should have crowned his greatest achievement, the Grammy stage delivered him nothing but silence. Bad was shut out, while U2's The Joshua Tree walked away with Album of the Year. Why did the Academy turn its back on the world's biggest star? And what was happening behind closed doors that changed the course of pop history? The answer reveals far more than a simple awards upset. In the fall of 1987, Michael Jackson's Bad began its assault on the Billboard Hot 100 with a momentum rarely seen in popular music. The first single, I Just Can't Stop Loving You, debuted in late summer and quickly climbed to the top, reaching #1 on September 19, 1987. That initial surge was only the beginning. By October, the title track Bad had claimed the #1 spot for 2 weeks, its iconic video and infectious hook dominating radio and television alike. Momentum carried into winter. The Way You Make Me Feel broke through in December, securing another #1 slot on December 12, 1987. The singles run was brief but decisive, its impact magnified by constant MTV rotation and relentless airplay. By early 1988, Jackson's presence on the charts was inescapable. Man in the Mirror, released in February, soared to #1 by March 12, 1988, holding its position for 2 weeks. The song's message and Jackson's performance resonated far beyond the pop audience, capturing headlines and adding to the album's growing legacy. Spring brought Dirty Diana, a harder-edged track that proved Jackson's versatility. It reached #1 on April 9, 1988, and stayed there for 2 weeks, pushing the album's tally to an unprecedented 5 #1 singles. No solo male artist had ever achieved that milestone from a single album. In total, these 5 songs spent 13 weeks at the top of the Hot 100, with Bad singles occupying more than a quarter of the year's #1 slots. Each single's ascent was measured, sequential, and relentless, September through July, one after another, with barely a pause between peaks. Behind the numbers was a wave of demand that extended beyond the United States. Bad hit #1 in the United Kingdom and topped charts across Europe and Japan, but the United States run stood apart for its precision and scale. Radio programmers, retailers, and industry analysts watched as each new release repeated the same pattern: immediate airplay, rapid sales, and a climb to the summit of the charts. Billboard's weekly issues chronicled the streak, and Epic Records fueled the narrative with promotional campaigns celebrating each new milestone. By the time Grammy ballots were being cast for the 1988 awards, Bad had already rewritten the rules for single-by-single success. 5 #1 singles, each spaced just weeks apart, each with its own chart-topping moment. The numbers left little room for doubt. In a business built on hits, Bad's performance was the gold standard. Yet, as the ballots approached their deadline, the very dominance that seemed to guarantee victory would soon be weighed against a different set of values. Quincy Jones entered the Bad sessions with a clear mandate to avoid the shadow of Thriller. He said they did not want to make Thriller 2, they wanted to go somewhere else. That philosophy shaped every detail, from the first demo to the final mix. Jones and Jackson spent months in Westlake Studios, experimenting with technology that had only just entered the mainstream. Drum machines, digital synthesizers, and the synclavier brought a modern edge to tracks like Smooth Criminal and Liberian Girl. The team layered these innovations over live horns, gospel choirs, and hand-played percussion, building a sound that was sleek but never cold. The process was not just about new gear. Jones pushed for songs that challenged Michael's comfort zone. Nearly 36 tracks were recorded, but only 11 made the final cut. Some choices were bold. The duet with Prince was scrapped, while Streetwalker was left on the shelf, despite its infectious groove. Every decision pointed toward reinvention, not repetition. In interviews, Jones described Michael as more focused and mature than ever, determined to take creative risks even as pressure mounted to repeat past formulas. Studio sessions often ran deep into the night. Engineers recall Jackson's relentless drive for perfection, recording dozens of vocal takes, fine-tuning harmonies, and debating the emotional tone of a single lyric. Jones, meanwhile, balanced the technical with the human, reminding the team that the soul has to come through the science. He saw Bad not as a sequel, but as a statement. Michael Jackson was an artist in control, not a product of his own success. Anticipation outside the studio was intense. Industry insiders expected a blockbuster, but they also watched for signs of growth. Critics and fans alike wondered if lightning could strike twice, or if Jackson's new direction would alienate the gatekeepers who prized authenticity over spectacle. The album's polished sound, its embrace of technology, and its refusal to lean on nostalgia set it apart from the rock-driven records that dominated Grammy ballads in the late 80s. Jones later reflected that Bad's ambition was both its strength and its risk. The album's sonic evolution, its refusal to play it safe, and its pursuit of something new challenged the very notion of what pop music could be. That pursuit thrilled audiences, but for some in the industry, it blurred the line between innovation and excess. As Grammy season approached, the creative choices that fueled Bad's momentum would soon be weighed against a different set of expectations, ones shaped less by artistry and more by tradition. Inside the Recording Academy, the makeup of the voting body in 1988 shaped every outcome. Most members were seasoned professionals, engineers, producers, and musicians whose careers stretched back to the 1960s and the 1970s. The average age hovered in the late 40s to early 50s, with many voters having come up through the era of classic rock, jazz, and traditional pop. This generational tilt influenced their tastes and priorities, especially when it came to the most coveted award of the night. The Academy's procedures gave these members significant influence. To vote, a member needed at least 3 years of active professional experience. The nomination process was open, but final ballots, sent to roughly 5,000 members, were tallied without genre quotas or screening committees. That meant the prevailing sensibility of the group, not just the commercial charts, decided the winners. In 1988, that sensibility leaned away from the flash and spectacle of pop toward records that felt rooted in what many considered the serious tradition and singer-songwriter craft. The shadow of 1984 lingered over the room. 4 years earlier, Michael Jackson's Thriller had swept the Grammys, collecting 8 awards in a single night, more than any artist had ever won at one ceremony. The spectacle of that sweep was still fresh in the minds of Academy members. Industry writers at the time described an unease about repeating such dominance. According to the Los Angeles Times and Rolling Stone, there was quiet talk among insiders about not letting any single artist, no matter how successful, take over the show again. The idea was not written into any rule book, but the sentiment was there. The Grammys should honor excellence, not just commercial power. Many voters saw themselves as guardians of musical standards. For them, the album of the year was not just about sales or radio play, it was about depth, musicianship, and the sense that a record would stand the test of time. This perspective often favored rock albums, which were framed as more authentic or substantial than pop. The critical acclaim for U2's The Joshua Tree fit perfectly into this mold. It was seen as a work of artistic weight, with themes that felt socially conscious and musically ambitious. For a voting pool raised on Dylan, the Beatles, and Springsteen, this kind of album resonated on a deeper level than even the biggest pop juggernaut. Meanwhile, the unprecedented run of Bad, 5 #1 singles, millions of albums sold was impossible to ignore, but its very dominance raised concerns. Some Academy members worried about the optics of another Michael Jackson sweep, fearing it would turn the Grammys into a coronation rather than a competition. The phrase Thriller effect circulated in industry circles, shorthand for the anxiety that too much commercial success could overshadow artistic merit. The more Jackson's achievements piled up, the more the old guard questioned whether the awards should reflect the charts or something else entirely. As ballots were cast, these undercurrents shaped the choices. The rules were clear, but the culture of the Academy was built on tradition, memory, and the desire to avoid another year where one artist's shadow stretched over everyone else. In this environment, the path to victory for Bad was far less certain than its chart performance suggested. The voters' collective mindset, shaped by age, experience, and the memory of Thriller's sweep, would prove decisive in the final tally. Magazine covers in late 1987 still carried Michael Jackson's face, but the tone inside had shifted. Where early reviews for Bad celebrated its chart power and sonic ambition, the press began to question whether Jackson's dominance was healthy for pop music or for the Grammys themselves. The Village Voice ran columns dissecting Jackson's image and the relentless pace of his success, suggesting the spectacle was beginning to overwhelm the substance. By the time Grammy ballots landed, the phrase Jackson fatigue was making the rounds in editorial meetings and radio chatter. Writers for Variety and the Los Angeles Times pointed to a sense that the industry and the public were growing weary, not of the music, but of the never-ending Michael Jackson phenomenon. Rolling Stone, which had once championed Jackson's artistic leap from off the wall to Thriller, now reserved its highest praise for something else. In a 5-star review, the magazine called U2's The Joshua Tree a landmark album, lauding its rock-rooted gravitas and its search for meaning in a world of confusion. Critics describe Bono's lyrics as urgent and poetic, and the band's sound as both epic and grounded. While Bad was celebrated for its production and commercial reach, The Joshua Tree was framed as an album with a conscience, a record that spoke to the times. The press cast U2 as artists on a mission, not just stars chasing hits. Headlines in the months before the Grammys drew a sharp line between the two contenders. Newsweek and Time ran features questioning whether Jackson's focus on spectacle and image had come at the expense of intimacy and authenticity. The Los Angeles Times described Bad as devoid of human emotions, despite its chart-topping singles, while Variety speculated that Grammy voters were quietly looking for something more serious. The idea took hold that, after the excess of Thriller's sweep, the Academy was searching for a new narrative, one that rewarded depth over dominance. Joshua Tree's appeal grew as the critical conversation deepened. U2 was seen as the antidote to pop saturation, a band rooted in the tradition of Springsteen and Dylan, writing about faith, politics, and personal struggle. Their music videos showed desert landscapes and stark black and white imagery, reinforcing a sense of earnestness and artistic weight. Bono's interviews were quoted in the press as evidence of sincerity, a contrast to the tabloid frenzy that seemed to follow Jackson everywhere. As Grammy night approached, the media's framing became its own kind of campaign. Critics and columnists argued that the Recording Academy had a responsibility to recognize not just what sold, but what mattered. The Joshua Tree, with its themes of hope and disillusionment, was positioned as the album that could restore the Grammys' credibility. For voters who read Rolling Stone or followed the Village Voice, the message was clear: U2 represented artistry and substance, while Jackson's Bad, no matter how dazzling, was just another chapter in a story that some were ready to close. The ballots went out, shaped as much by headlines as by the music itself. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, the press had already begun to write the ending. For the first time in years, Michael Jackson's greatest rival was not another pop star, but a shift in the cultural conversation, a belief that the time had come for a different kind of victory. Spotlight swung across Radio City Music Hall as the 30th annual Grammy Awards unfolded, each announcement tightening the air. Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones sat side by side, faces composed, as the first major pop categories were called. In the Best Pop Vocal Performance field, Man in the Mirror was nominated, but the trophy went to Whitney Houston for I Wanna Dance with Somebody. The audience buzzed, a ripple of surprise passing through the rows. Next came Record of the Year. Dirty Diana stood among the favorites. Yet again, Jackson's name was read only as a nominee. The award went to Houston once more. Each loss chipped away at the expectation that this would be another Jackson-dominated night. The tension built with every envelope. Nomination after nomination slipped away. Song of the Year, Producer of the Year, even categories where Jackson's previous albums had triumphed. Quincy Jones, usually all smiles, grew visibly tense. Jackson maintained his poise, offering polite applause as colleagues claimed the stage. Then the marquee moment arrived. Album of the Year, The Joshua Tree by U2 was declared the winner. The camera found Jackson in the crowd, expression unreadable, applause measured. For the first time since Off the Wall, Michael Jackson left the Grammys without a single major award. The official winners list released that night confirmed it. Bad, despite its 5 #1 singles and global impact, had been locked out. The room, in the music world, felt the shock in real time. Backstage, the mood was heavy. Michael Jackson left Radio City Music Hall without a single major Grammy. His face described by one eyewitness in the Los Angeles Times as ashen. The public saw only his measured applause and careful composure, but those close to him recalled a deep sense of disappointment. The press quoted insiders who called him crestfallen, a man who, for all his global success, felt the sting of rejection from the industry he had just dominated. Quincy Jones, usually the first to break tension with a joke, remained silent and tight-lipped. For Michael, the night was more than a professional setback. Friends and collaborators later remembered how the defeat lingered, not as bitterness, but as a quiet question about what counted as real recognition. In the weeks that followed, he retreated from public appearances, focusing instead on his craft. Studio logs from 1989 show Michael beginning to sketch new ideas and melodies, setting the groundwork for what would become the Dangerous album. Notes from those early sessions reveal an artist searching for new sounds, pushing himself further, determined not to let outside opinions define his work. The Grammy shutout became a private turning point. Rather than slow down, Michael poured his frustration into creativity, channeling disappointment into ambition. The world would see the results a few years later, but the drive began here, in the quiet aftermath of a night that left even the biggest star in music questioning what came next. Today, the Grammys still face scrutiny over how industry politics and shifting tastes shape their legacy. As streaming rewrites what defines musical greatness, the line between art and popularity grows ever more contested. Michael Jackson's snub remains a reminder. Recognition may be fleeting, but true impact endures far beyond any trophy. The conversation about who gets to define greatness is more urgent than ever. Share your thoughts below.